Hey guys, welcome to Tales from a Retro Gamer, episode number 19. My name is Brett Weiss, thanks for tuning in. Now, as most of you know, Nintendo recently made it to where you could download 20 Super Nintendo games for your Switch. It's a really good lot of games. I'm really excited about this because I've got a Switch, and what I've done is I've gone through the list and I've picked out my 5 favorite games from that list of 20. Now, there's not really a weak title on the list. I picked out 5 really good ones, my 5 favorites in order and I'm going to talk about them here a little bit from 5 to 1. Okay, first of all, Super Metroid. Now, this was the third game in the Metroid series that began with Metroid on the NES, then Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, and then Super Metroid was just such a huge advance over those 2 games. Now, Metroid for the NES was one of my favorite NES games. I love that game. I'm typically more into simple action games that are linear, but for some reason, the Metroid series just really grabbed me. I love it. Super Metroid is just excellent. It's a huge game. It's massive. It's much bigger than the original Metroid. Better graphics, of course. It's a big, non-linear platform shooter, a massive adventure. It's just a great game. It kind of gives me the feeling of Alien, the original Alien movie, of being alone in space. Now, Alien, there were several crew members in outer space, but they had that desolate feeling where they're alone and it's scary and creepy. Well, I get that same feeling when I'm playing Super Metroid. It's just an excellent game, a very deep platform shooter. They added some new things to the Metroid series. A grapple beam that lets you swing on ceilings. You can now shoot diagonally in the game, and it's easier than Metroid. The first 2 Metroids were very hard. Super Metroid was much easier. It's a beatable game. Unfortunately, I don't have it here to show you because, like an idiot, I sold my complete copy of Super Metroid in the box a few years ago on eBay because it hit the $100 mark, and I was like, I hadn't played that in a while. I'm going to sell it. I wish I had it back now. One of those regrets. Now, number 4 on my list is one of the greatest games of all time. As a matter of fact, Super Metroid is one of the greatest games of all time, as is this one, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. It's the sequel to the great Legend of Zelda for the NES, and it's an even better game. I do have my complete in-box copy. There's no way I would get rid of this. As a matter of fact, I love this game so much that I wanted to play it on the go, to be able to play it on the go as well back in the day. So I picked it up for the Game Boy Advance. And so I don't usually do that unless I can get a game for $1 or $2. I'll throw it in the collection. But I don't usually get another game just so I can play it on the go. But Link to the Past is such a great game. I did that. It's better than the original Zelda, which is saying a lot because that was a great game. And it was kind of after Zelda 2 disappointed people with the side-scrolling stuff. It kind of went back to the basics of The Legend of Zelda, but with the bigger maps, more sweeping musical score, better music, better graphics, the works. It's the perfect blend of action, adventure, and puzzle solving. It's just a beautiful game with excellent controls, sweeping, once again, a great musical score, and it's just a fantastic game. Real-time melee battles, beautiful game. Now, in my first book, my first Super Nintendo book, the SNES Omnibus Volume 1, a very talented writer by the name of Erin Hawley, she wrote a story, Hawley, Hawley. She wrote an excellent story about Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, and I'm going to read it for you real quick. Erin Hawley is a blogger and a journalist. She blogs for the Geeky Gimp, her website. The concept of parallel universes and other sci-fi or paranormal ideas fascinated me when I was a kid. Tie that into one of my favorite video game franchises, and I was enamored. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past allowed me to realize both my love of fantasy adventure and epic storytelling through gaming. While playing the game, I felt like I was not out just experiencing Hyrule and its forest caves and dungeons, but building them as well. Through projecting myself onto Link, I was on a creative journey, only bound by the corners of the TV screen. Yes, the plot is written out for you, but the story and its environments were so rich that in-game choices weighed heavy on my mind, and non-playable characters, depending on their role, became my neighbors or despised enemies. The introduction to the dark world further spurred my creativity as I saw myself battling through to Ganon, the monstrous wizard. The game reminded me of one of my favorite books of the time, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and Through the Looking Glass. Everything is curious on the other side of the mirror, and like Alice, Link must battle to make it right again. The Zelda series grounds this fantasy world into reality through gameplay and its adventure that continues enchanting a new generation of gamers. I can't wait to introduce my niece to the series. Now, you can see for Zelda: Link to the Past, I dedicated 2 pages in the game to the book, to the game, because it's just such a phenomenal game. very important game as well. And so that was from Aaron Holly. Thanks, Aaron, for an excellent story in my SNES Omnibus. Now, next in the list, my third favorite game, Super Nintendo game that you can play for the Switch, is Yoshi's Island. Now, I do have a completed box copy of Yoshi's Island. This is the sequel to Super Mario World. It's actually called, some people call it Yoshi's Island Super Mario World 2. Some people call it Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Regardless, it's a fantastic game, which I kind of screwed up on at first. When the game first came out, I looked at it and I considered it because I love Super Mario World, but I didn't buy it for a while because it seemed kind of juvenile. Now, if you look at the graphics, they look like they were made with crayons and colored markers and, you know, mark slots and that kind of thing. You're a baby riding Yoshi, and you ride Yoshi almost throughout the whole game, which is, you know, Yoshi was introduced in Super Mario World as, you know, a playable character. You know, you ride on Yoshi, but in this game, you're on him almost the whole time. It had a lot of differences, like you could create and throw eggs. You could stomp the ground, which you would also you could do in Donkey Kong Country, and it was just such a departure from the original Super Mario World that I was actually kind of turned off by it a little bit. And when you're first playing it, you have all this text screens that drop down telling you what to do with all these controls. It seemed a little more complicated than Super Mario World. I just wanted to pick it up and play it. I just kind of set it aside, didn't think about it, but then, you know, I didn't buy it right away. Later on, when I was researching the SNES Omnibus, I went back to Yoshi's Island to, you know, I'd always heard this was a great game, to see what I missed out on. So I spent more time with it. I really figured out the controls, figured out the subtleties in the game, and I come to appreciate the sort of fairy tale-like quality of the game, the beautiful colors, it's sort of an interactive fairy tale almost. It's just a beautiful, beautiful game. If you give it a chance, stick some time with it, and just forget about the fact that maybe it looks like it's a kiddie game. It's not. It's a very deep platformer. It's an excellent game. I highly recommend it. So that's number 3. Now, number 2 is a little bit of a throwback because it's the original Super Mario Kart. I love this game for a lot of reasons. It's fantastic. It created a new genre. Now, I have Kart. I have the manual too, but I have the cartridge here. I don't have the box, unfortunately, but, you know, it's still, you know, a great game, still very playable. Don't need the box to play it, obviously. But I am a box collector, but I'm not a completist. So anyway, Super Mario Kart. I like to go back to it from time to time. I still play, you know, I love the Super Mario Kart series. My favorite in the series is Double Dash for the GameCube. I love the 2 players in each kart, and I love you can play 4 players. Super Mario Kart is still a 2-player game. And, you know, as the series would progress, the tracks would get more elaborate. You're driving through space. You're driving through all these advanced worlds. Super Mario Kart is back to the basics, which I like to do from time to time. It's an excellent game. It's one of these low-to-ground racers. And, you know, before Super Mario Kart, the kart race, you know, the go-kart genre wasn't really a thing yet. It spawned a million imitators. I don't think it's one of the greatest games of all time, even though I like it so much, but I do think it's one of the most important games of all time. And John Lester, you may know as Gamester81 on YouTube, he wrote a really cool story about Super Mario Kart for my SNES Omnibus Volume 2. I'm going to read that for you real quick. Thanks, John, for the story, and here it is. Super Mario Kart, John Lester. Super Mario Kart is very near and dear to my heart, and I have very fond memories playing the game after school while I was in junior high. My school at the time had an area in the cafeteria where they had various games set up for kids to play at the end of the day, and I was always glued to Super Mario Kart. I was blown away by the use of Mode 7 graphics and the fun racing action. My personal favorite characters to play as were, and still are, Toad and Koopa Troopa. Super Mario Kart was so much different than any other games I'd played up until then. Sure, F-Zero is an awesome racer as well, and also made great use of the Mode 7 for the SNES, but what really set Super Mario Kart apart was the battle mode. This mode brought out the competitive spirit in me, and to have the game themed around one of my all-time favorite gaming franchises in Mario was definitely a huge plus. Thanks, John. Very cool story. I don't recall ever playing a video game at school. That definitely didn't happen. The only video games I saw at school when we would bring trades, you know, to trade with our friends. Very cool. Thanks, John. Now, my favorite game for the Super Nintendo that you can now play on the Switch is Super Mario World. no big surprise here. Now, in fact, none of the games on my list are like dark horses or hidden gems or anything. But I wanted to be honest with you guys, which I always am. I just wanted to give it out straight. My favorite 5 games, and Super Mario World is my favorite. It's an epic sweeping game. It's pretty much a perfect platformer. To me, when it came out, it was like more Super Mario Brothers 1 and 2, or 1 and 3, I should say, but bigger and much bigger worlds, more secrets, more surprises, some new powers. You could now throw turtles, you could fly, and like I mentioned earlier, you could ride Yoshi. And thankfully, it actually had battery backup, so you didn't have to play it and leave it, for a long time, and then leave it paused for hours and then come back to it, or just restart it, from the very beginning if you lost all your lives. Awesome Super Mario World. Now for me, it was the pack-in game with my Super Nintendo. So obviously I just have the cartridge, and but I love that game. Super Mario World is absolutely awesome. Another Super Nintendo game that's coming to the Switch, or that is on the Switch now, that is considered one of the greatest video games of all time. Very strong lineup of games, Super Nintendo games you can now play on your Switch. I left some titles out that I really like a lot, but before I get to that, I'm going to read a really cool story about Super Mario World from a man named Vodka. Let's see here. I did have the bookmark, but it went away. Super Mario World. So Vodka, he was a programmer for Telltale Games, and obviously they went out of business, but he was a very talented programmer, so I'm sure he'll land on his feet and have a bright future. So let's see here. Super Mario World will always have a special place in my heart. My Super Nintendo was a Christmas gift from my mother. My parents were separated and I lived with my father. This was my very first console, and as a bonus it included Super Mario World, my very first game. I spent my youth traveling between family members, and I brought my Super Nintendo everywhere with me. I became a master at setting it up and taking it down. There was no TV I couldn't hook it up to. I became the family AV expert, self-taught. My parents didn't understand video games, and they thought they wasted my brain away. So Super Mario World was the only game I had for a long time. Thankfully, there was tons of game content packed into that cartridge. There wasn't anything Mario couldn't do, and I escaped with him. I flew with a feather. I met Yoshi, and I explored haunted houses. Every challenge was thematically appropriate to the world and stage. I loved that game. I played every stage and found every secret level. It was the first game that I beat alone, and my first game that I finished to 100% completion. Having that 96 next to my top save slot was my first video game badge of honor. Thank you, Vodka, for that very cool story. We've all heard stories like that where parents just either wouldn't let kids play video games or just limited severely or just told them they were rot their brain or whatever. Thanks again, Juan, for that. I do have a couple of games I want to mention that didn't make my list of 5 because I really enjoy them a lot. One is Super Ghouls and Ghosts. It's an excellent game. It didn't quite make the cut because the controls aren't as good as the 5 games I mentioned, but it is an excellent game with a great horror atmosphere. Another one, Demon's Crest, which I don't currently own. It's a very hard to find, very rare Super Nintendo game, but it's very cool that you can now play it on your Switch. Guys, if you could comment below, what is of the 20 Super Nintendo games you can now play on your Switch, what is your favorite game? Please comment below with that. Comment which game and why. Speaking of comments, last week I talked about growing up Nintendo. And my question was, I wanted to ask you guys, did you have any games that you played with grandparents? Did you have any interesting stories about elderly members of your family or friends or whatever playing video games? And I did have some interesting comments. Eric Plunk said, I don't have any elderly gamer stories. However, my dad seemed elderly to me when we got our NES in 1988 when I was 5. He actually beat Super Mario Brothers, but I never saw him touch another video game after that. Funnily enough, Super Mario Brothers is one of the only Mario games I've never finished. Now, some other comments I got were about my mullet. I had a pretty savage mullet, back in the 90s, back in the 80s. So some of you guys commented on that. Thanks for that. So I appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks for liking. If you could hit that subscribe button, I would really, really appreciate it. That would help me a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you guys later. Peace out. One interesting note, the 20 games that made it to that you can now play on the Switch from the Super Nintendo, 3 of those were sports games. Super Nintendo.
No, I said don't include this. Just say some honorable mentions.
Okay. Well, Why? I think it's interesting.
Because it's already 15 minutes into this.
Okay.